Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. I'm your narrator Simon. Tonight we're heading over to Japan for an incident that happened a few years ago. In past episodes I covered a few hung stories, stigmatized properties, rooms with history, places where people have died. Many of you requested more stories related to this topic. So tonight we're diving into another one. This story was shared by the younger brother of our main character. His older brother, whom we'll call Sat, worked at a well-known courier company at the time in Tokyo. By the time this incident happened to him, he had already been working there for a few years. Delivery sounds simple, but anyone who's done it knows how brutal it can be. Long hours, constant rushing, the weight of some packages digging into your shoulders. Sat spent his days driving across town non-stop, dropping off parcel after parcel, barely getting a moment to breathe. One day, one of his closest co-workers, a guy named Yuma, fell ill and needed to stay in the hospital for a few days. Management asked Sat if he could temporarily take over his route. Now Yuma and Sat were pretty tight good friends, so Sato didn't hesitate. Of course he would help, and with the company short on staff, taking on an extra route meant extra money. He wasn't complaining, but double the work is still double the work, and Sat knew it wasn't going to be easy money. So was not familiar with Yuma's usual route, so the first day felt a little clumsy. A bunch of new streets with new buildings. It took him a bit to get his bearings. One of the deliveries was addressed to a unit inside an old sprawling housing complex. The kind of place that looks like a maze from the outside. He's driven past a couple of times but never once stepped inside. He remembers this first day vividly because it was the peak of summer. The kind of heat that sticks to your back and crawls down your collar. He grabbed the package, headed to the 7th floor, and rang the bell at Unit 7C. No answer. He pressed the bell again, then a third time. All the while, standing there in that suffocating hallway, sweat sticking to his uniform, he leaned closer, listening for any kind of movement behind the door. Nothing, dead silent. So he sighed, turned around, ready to head back to the truck, when he heard a soft click. The door opened. Only a sliver through the narrow crack. Someone was staring out. A woman. So they could barely see her face at first, so he politely announced that he had a package requiring a signature. For a moment she didn't react at all. She just stood there, half hidden behind the door, staring at him through the gap. Then, slowly she opened it wider, and that's when he finally saw her clearly. Jet black hair, fair skin, quite delicate features, a woman who looked like she was in her early 20s and almost distractingly beautiful. So wasn't expecting that. He actually stumbled over his words for a second before managing, "Oh, sorry to disturb you, ma'am. I'm here with the delivery. I just need your signature." He held out the pen. She didn't speak, not a single word. Just stared at him expressionless, then snatched the pen, scribbled something, took the parcel, and shut the door immediately. Sat blinked. That was strange and a bit rude. Soda shrugged it off and went back to his truck to continue with the rest of his deliveries for the day. The very next day, Soda had another package addressed to the same unit, second day in a row. He drove back to the same housing complex, and without even realizing it, his heart gave a small jump. Part of him was looking forward to seeing this beautiful woman again. Before getting out of the truck, he quickly checked his reflection in the side mirror, straightened his hair, and made sure he didn't have any food or anything stuck on his face before he headed inside. This time, the moment Essa pressed the doorbell, the door opened immediately. The same woman stood there. "Hello again, miss. I've got a package for you," Sa said, trying to sound casual. "I just need you to sign here again." He reached into his pocket for his pen and felt nothing. His stomach dropped. He was so focused on making sure he looked presentable that he must have left it in the truck. Embarrassed, he apologized. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I think I forgot my pen downstairs. Do you maybe have one I could borrow?" The woman didn't react at first. She just stared at him for several long seconds. Then she turned around without a word and walked deeper into the unit, disappearing into the living room. From inside, her soft voice floated out. "Why don't you come inside?" Sort froze. This was against protocol. They weren't supposed to enter customers' homes. But the way she said it was so gentle and inviting, and the fact that she was so beautiful. Sort couldn't resist and gave in. He slipped off his shoes at the entrance, picked up the parcel, and stepped inside. In the back of his mind, he was thinking to himself, forgetting the pen might be the best mistake he's made all week. But something caught his attention immediately. There wasn't a single pair of shoes by the door. Not a single pair. Most Japanese households kept slippers or shoes neatly lined up at the entrance. The Jenkan Sot had delivered to enough homes to know what a normal entryway looked like. This one was totally empty. Maybe she keeps all the shoes hidden from sight. Some knee freaks do that, he told himself. He brushed it off and walked inside. The interior was spotless. Not a single speck of dust on the floor, no clatter, no mail, no dishes. It looked like an apartment out of a magazine. Everything was perfectly placed and pristine. Felt like a showroom more than an apartment that someone lived in. Wow, she's really tidy, Sa thought. He rounded the corner and finally saw her again. She was already sitting at the dining table in the living room with a pen in her hand and a cup of cold tea beside her. Please make yourself comfortable, she said. You must be so tired from all your hard work. Soda couldn't help smiling. Big goofy grin he couldn't hide. For a second, he imagined himself sitting down drinking tea with her, chatting like they had known each other for years, but reality set in. He was still on shift, already breaking company rules by stepping inside. He couldn't break another rule by accepting something to drink as well. He politely declined, keeping his voice respectful. Thank you, ma'am, but I really shouldn't. I've still got a lot of deliveries to make today. He handed her the slip. She signed it quickly, and then she just sat there staring at him, as if waiting for something. Her eyes were still expressionless, but now there was something off about her face. A smile pulling at her lips, not a natural smile. Not friendly, but something more forced, more like a smile someone practices in a mirror without knowing what motion is supposed to go with it. Sa felt that smile lingering on him long after he backed out of that room. Suta forced a smile, trying to shake off that strange forced grin the woman had given him. Well, okay. Thank you so much. Sorry again for the trouble. I'll let myself out. He turned toward the entrance, and that was when he heard it, a low, drawn-out groaning sound, coming from the bedroom by the entrance. Sort froze mid-step. He turned back toward the woman expecting her to react, or at least acknowledge the noise. But she didn't even look his way. She just sat there at the table, staring blankly out the window, almost as if she had slipped into some kind of daze, as if nothing had happened at all. So, hesitated and thought, someone sick. Maybe there was an elderly person inside. He didn't want to pry and he was already behind schedule. So he bowed politely, stepped out and went back to his truck, trying to push the uneasiness out of his mind. The next morning, all staff gathered for the daily briefing. Their supervisor stood in front, arms crossed, face stern. Recently we've received multiple complaints, seeing some packages never arrived. I'm not going to name names, but this cannot continue. Our reputation is at stake. Everyone needs to be more careful. No one said a word. The room stayed tense for a moment. Then everyone headed out to start their day. As Sop reviewed his manifest, mapping out his road, he saw it again. Another parcel for the same housing complex, that same unit. Part of him felt a small spark of excitement. This would be his last day, covering for Yuma. Last chance to see this beautiful woman in Unit 7C. But another part of him replayed that groaning sound in his head. What exactly is in that room? The question clung to him all morning. By the time he arrived at the complex again, curiosity had fully taken over. A curiosity strong enough that he made the same mistake on purpose. He left his pen in the truck. He rang the bell and just like before, the door opened quickly. Same woman, same expression. And now Sot realized she was wearing the same outfit 3 days in a row. Now he apologized for forgetting his pen again. She silently turned and walked back toward the living room. Then just like yesterday, that soft voice drifted out. Please come inside. And again, sorta did. This time, he immediately looked toward the bedroom. The door was half open. And the moment he saw that, something inside him churned. That instinctive discomfort you get right before you do something you're not supposed to do. But curiosity got the better of him. He leaned forward, just enough to peer through the gap. Someone was lying on the bed. A person under the blankets on their side facing away from the door. Their back rising and falling with slow labored breaths, like someone very sick. Sword stared for a few seconds. Then the figure shifted as if it sensed them watching. It moved slowly, turning just enough for its face to come into view. Their eyes met. A man maybe in his 20s, but his eyes were bloodshot. Unfocused, glazed over like he hadn't slept in days. His mouth hung open unnaturally wide. Drool spilling from one corner, running down his chin and soaking into his pillow. It didn't look like illness. It looked wrong, inhuman. Stu felt every hair on his body stand up at once, but before he could even process what he was looking at, a voice boomed behind him. "What are you looking at?" To gasp so hard he nearly fell over. The woman was right behind him. He hadn't heard a single footstep. No, nothing. "I'm so sorry," he stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. I didn't realize your husband is sick. I apologize truly. I shouldn't have looked in without permission." Suta didn't wait for a reply. He put the package down, didn't even bother getting her signature, and bolted out the front door. He sprinted down the hallway, down the stairs, straight out of the building, not stopping until he reached this truck. Only then did he look up toward the 7th floor. Good, she didn't chase me, so that must have been her husband. He sat there for a moment, catching his breath, a mix of fear and strangely disappointment. He had built up this woman in his mind, and now the whole thing felt broken, twisted. He shook it off and forced himself through the rest of his deliveries. The next morning, before he could even clock in, Sat was called into the supervisor's office. The supervisor's expression was dark. "So, remember, yesterday when I mentioned complaints about undelivered packages that was actually directed towards you?" Sat blinked. "Me. We received another complaint yesterday about an undelivered package. Tell me, where did you hide the customer's parcels?" Stu felt heat rise from his chest. "What? I swear I didn't hide anything. I delivered everything." His supervisor didn't look convinced. "Department cameras recorded you entering that housing complex several times, always with a package, but you never delivered it to the target unit. Some of the units there are empty and unlocked. Did you stash the packages inside one of them?" At that moment, the memory hit him like cold water. The woman in the spotless apartment, the sick, drooling man from his bed, and that unnatural forced smile. A chill crawled down his spine. That morning, Solta brought his supervisor with him to the building. He was determined to prove that he wasn't stealing the packages to have the woman and 7C vouch for him. He had delivered 3 packages there. He knew he had. They reached the door. Right away Sat felt something was off. The front door looked older, weathered, the clean, polished door he had seen the past few days. His supervisor pressed the doorbell multiple times. Silence. Sat nothing. Maybe she's not home. But before he could finish the thought, his supervisor grabbed the door. A knob. It turned without resistance. The door swung open easily. Inside the entryway were all the packages he had delivered the past few days, neatly stacked, unopened. The supervisor shot him a sharp look. "What's going on here? How do you explain this?" Shocked, Sat picked up the unopened packages just to double-check the address. He swore he read the address correctly these past few days. But now that he was looking, all of these packages had different unit numbers on them. They were indeed meant for this building, but none of them were addressed to 70C. Sword's mouth went dry, as he had no reasonable explanation. But the deeper they walked, the stranger things became. The living room was almost completely empty. The place was coated in a thick layer of dust. The air smelled stale, like no one had set foot inside for months, maybe years. The only furniture in the entire apartment was the single dining table, and sitting right on top of it, the cup of cold tea the woman had offered him, untouched. The rest of the apartment showed zero signs of anyone living there at all. So, the supervisor glared at him. That expression said everything, and that was the day So lost his job. As he was packing up his locker, one of the office ladies came over. She spoke quietly, almost as if she didn't want anyone else to hear. "You're delivering to that old housing complex, right? I heard something about that place." Sword looked up. "I don't know which unit exactly," she continued. "But apparently a married couple lived there a few years ago. The wife had mental issues, they fought constantly. Neighbors called the police all the time about screaming and shouting. The whole building could hear it. One night, the wife made her husband a cup of tea. She mixed a rat poison inside of it. He died in that apartment, and afterwards she hanged herself there. She shivered. People say the unit's been empty ever since. Sota felt his stomach twist. He remembered that man in bed. The glazed eyes, the drool, the way he looked back at him as if begging for something. That man, was he the husband? So, Hong Kong horror fans, what do you think happened here to Sota? Please, pause the video here and let me know your theory in the comments below. All right, so what do I think happened here? Looking at this from a Chinese cultural perspective, the entire incident follows a very familiar pattern to hunger hunting, stigmatized property haunting. But this is not just any hunger. This is what we call Yamzong Yin Yin world, reenactmental loop boast replaying the most intense moment of their life. The moment of trauma, guilt or death trapped inside a memory that overlays the real world. And Sot stepped directly into that loop without realizing it. So why was SA able to see the woman and eventually the man? In Chinese belief, the living and the dead overlap easiest when you're exhausted, mentally unfocused, unfamiliar with the place you're in, or when your yang hai is weak, yang energy. When yang energy weakens, yang hai rises, yin energy, and the boundary between worlds thins. So at the time fit many of these. He was overworked since he was covering for Yuma, stressed, taking a new route, and entered an unfamiliar building he doesn't normally make deliveries in. He was in the perfect energetic condition for ghosts to approach. From a Chinese perspective, he didn't walk into an apartment. He walked into the yin version of that very apartment. The ghost's memory. Spirits that are tied to violent deaths don't usually linger because of death itself. They linger because of unfinished emotion. This woman murdered her husband, which means she carried a mix of different extreme emotions related to guilt and unresolved obsession. These create what we called Yumling, vengeful obsessed spirits. What Sot interacted with is something known as a death loop. You may be wondering if this is a death loop. Why did SA not see the part where the woman ended her own life via hanging? Good question. A death loop, Zong Chun, and does not mean the ghost replace every single part of their death. In East Asian ghost lore, spirits rarely reenact the entire chain of events every time they loop. Most of the time, they will reenact the strongest emotional moment for them. The moment that locks their soul in place. In Chinese belief, this is called tapnim, obsessive fixation, or some inner demon. This is the emotional moment they can't move past. I believe the wife's fixation moment wasn't her own demise. It was the moment she poisoned her husband. If you think about the state she must have been in, the years of arguing, living inside that toxic atmosphere, her mental health slowly getting worse and eventually reaching a point where she planned to murder. All of that emotional weight would have built up long before she ever tied a rope for herself. This was her emotional climax. Her hanging herself came after all that guilt and panic, after the crime had already been committed. But the true anchor event, the trauma, was the poisoning of her husband. I think this is why she kept reenacting this part of her life. The serving of the tea, sitting at the table, quietly waiting. I believe this is exactly what she did the night this event happened. As she waited for her husband to die after drinking the tea, she served him. Also, the layout of the apartment that Sat saw, as well as the outfit she wore all the time. I think these were a projection of everything the night this tragedy happened. It was how the apartment looked that night. It was the outfit she wore. Now some ghosts, they do replay their own moment of death if that was the moment of emotional collapse for them. But this is not always the case. There are many other cases from Hong Kong folklore, where ghosts similar to the one that Sort came across don't replay the method of death. For example, the story of the crying bride in Hong Kong. She died by ending her own life. But every time someone came across her, they report seeing her reenact putting on her wedding dress, not her death. Another example is the Saigon exorcism case. The girl was beaten to death, but her spirit reenacts her calling for her father, and not the beating. The same pattern shows up again and again. Spirits replay the moment that broke their soul, not always the final moment of death. The focus is always the most emotionally charged moment for them, and that differs in every situation. Thank you everyone for listening till the end. I look forward to speaking with all of you again next week.